With every artistic medium, we come to expect a whole lot of the same thing, and understandably so. This is because most artists have the same set of reliable tools, be they paintbrushes, musical chords, or narrative archetypes. If you understand these tools well, you can produce consistently good art. For some artists, though, good is not good enough. Some artists will cast aside these conventional tools in order to charter new artistic territory, in order to set new standards of originality that invoke paralyzing feelings of awe and moments of deep introspection. These feelings and moments, I think, can adequately be described as profound. For the last few years, I've used my YouTube channel to direct people's attention to these profound moments. To be more specific, I point to these types of moments in a medium that most of the world doesn't think is capable of producing them: video games. For several years, I've been making the case that video games should be taken as seriously as other artistic mediums, that they are capable of producing moments that will permanently transform us. Today, I want to present what I believe are the greatest of these moments, the moments that will leave you feeling both unspeakable horror and all-consuming joy. Before I begin, I wish to do a couple of things. First, I'll provide the same definition of profound that I did in my top 10 profound games list. When I say that a moment is profound, I don't just refer to the general quality of the moment. In this context, profound denotes anything that displays great knowledge or insight on the artist's behalf. Next, I will acknowledge that the vast majority of people watching this video probably already know what number 1 is. This is because my most popular video is titled The Most Profound Moment in Gaming History. Even if you know what number 1 is, I still think it's worthwhile doing this list. Not only to celebrate the profound moments in a multitude of other games, but to justify why I believe they do not quite measure up to the number 1 spot. I hope that by doing this list, I will demonstrate that my number 1 choice was not the result of bias, but the result of honest comparison with various other moments. There were several profound moments that were so close to making the number 10 spot, but ultimately failed to make the cut. I wish to give those moments some respect before we get to the actual list. These moments include Braid, when you find out who the real villain is. Dark Souls. If you stumble upon Ash Lake, you understand the game's cosmic scale and how insignificant you are in the face of it. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. Though any of the sanity effects from the game are brilliant, I'd pick the save game deletion fakeout as the best. Half-Life 1, when you reach the ending and you find out about the puppeteers pulling your strings. Inside, the game's alternate ending shows that the only way to quote-unquote win the game is not to play. Journey, when you achieve transcendence at the very end. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, when you find out the true identity of Darth Revan. And finally, the Talos Principle, when the robot achieves freedom from the training program and becomes indistinguishable from a human. Now with those out of the way, these are what I believe to be the top 10 most profound moments in video game history. Number 10. Vivi's Final Letter, Final Fantasy IX. One consistent theme that you will notice with this list is existentialism. If you don't know what existentialism is, it's basically the development of a personal philosophy that enables people to not only live, but to live well. Given the amount of suffering that is inherent to living, it's understandable that some people struggle with living well, when they could just as easily give into resentment and self-destruction. The most profound existentialists are the ones who confront the worst kind of pain and still provide life-affirming answers. Those types of answers are hard to come across, especially in the world of video games. However, they do exist, and you can find them in Final Fantasy IX. The prime example of Final Fantasy IX's positive existentialism is the character Vivi. Vivi is an artificial being that was built for warfare. He was also built to have a limited lifespan. These facts conflict with his burgeoning consciousness, a consciousness that desires for a peaceful and long life in a world that will not permit it. I cannot give justice to Vivi's struggle with this video. All I can say is that Vivi's argument in favor of life, despite its suffering, is one of the most powerful moments I've ever experienced in a video game. It's all laid out in a letter to his friends at the end of the game, which is read out after he dies. In summary, Vivi argues that even if we suffer, and even if there is nothing for us after death, we should still live. And the main reason Vivi gives is that there will be no other loves and friendships like the ones that we as individuals have, and we owe it to ourselves to experience them in all their unique sublimity. Number 9. The coin toss metaphor. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 2. There are 5 games in the Legacy of Kain series. In the first game, Blood Omen, the titular Kain is told that unless he sacrifices his life and gives his soul over to the world-sustaining pillars of Nosgoth, then the world will be reduced to a desolate wasteland. For the entirety of the second game, Soul Reaver, and parts of the third game, Soul Reaver 2, we are led to believe that Kain let Nosgoth fall to ruin. The other main character of the series, Raziel, is tasked with killing Kain so that the land of Nosgoth can return to health. There is an encounter between Raziel and Kain in Soul Reaver 2 where Kain tries to defend his actions. He explains that he was given a binary choice, one that he likens to a coin toss. Though it may seem like he chose one of the 2 options, he actually chose a secret third option, one that would allow him to live and Nosgoth to return to health. This would involve killing the being that gave Kain this binary choice in the first place, the Elder God. Raziel is confused as to how there can be a third option in a coin toss. Kain replies by saying that maybe if you throw a coin enough times, suppose one day it lands on its edge. This is actually possible, by the way. It will take you around 6,000 tries, but it can be done. This metaphor about a coin landing on its edge makes both Raziel and the player question what other false notions they may cling to. What other things in this world are possible that we are led to believe are not? For example, one other concept that Legacy of Kain struggles with is the existence of free will. Even if we exist in a world where everything is predetermined, can free will be invented, like it was for Raziel? It's a fascinating discussion, one that you wouldn't ever expect to find in a game about vampires. Number 8. The game shuts off. Undertale. I played this game for the first time a month ago. Prior to doing a video on it, I had no idea that there were so many people militant against it. I found the game to be magical, and it's in no small part due to the game's constant breaking of the fourth wall. At all times, the game makes you feel like it's watching you. When you do something as seemingly innocent as reload a save, the game confronts you about it. Few other games feel as reactive to your decisions as they do in Undertale. When something bad happens, you feel guilty, even when you shouldn't. The apex of this reactivity comes near the end of the game, when the primary villain, Flowey/Azrael, condemns your actions up until that point. As punishment, Flowey messes with you by turning the game off. While other games have had chilling fourth wall breaks in the past, some of which people might argue deserve a spot over Undertale, none ever go so far as to wrestle control away from the gamer to this extreme a degree, and chastise you while doing it. Number 7. The ending. The Last of Us. Yeah, we all knew this was coming. Imagine your daughter, or daughter figure in this case, was the solution to a deadly global pandemic. Imagine that her DNA could be reverse engineered to create a vaccine. However, in order for the vaccine to be created, your daughter would have to die. Obviously, the utilitarian answer is to let your daughter die, but that is definitely not what most people would do. And that's certainly not what Joel did when his daughter figure, Ellie, faced the same fate. Such a question forces the player to empathize with Joel. What would it feel like to not only lose your real daughter, as he did at the beginning of the game, but to go through something similar 20 years later? Many people can't even deal with just imagining the scenario. In impossible situations, people will do impossible things, and that is exactly what Joel did in order to save Ellie at the end of the game. But the most profound thing about this situation is not the situation itself, but the realization that if we were in Joel's shoes, the majority of us would have done what he did. If you disagree with me, Look at the comments section for my video titled The Last of Us. We would have done what Joel did. Those who disagree with me will be thoroughly disturbed. Number 6. The cake is a lie. Portal. Probably the most famous example on this list. For a while, it was the gaming meme that everybody quoted to each other, right up until Skyrim dethroned it with the whole arrow to the knee thing. For the majority of Portal, we are led to believe that it is just a puzzle game with nifty mechanics. We weren't anticipating anything other than cake. Literally, cake, which was promised to us as our reward for completing all the puzzles. Nothing sinister seemed to be going on behind the scenes, until we got to puzzle number 16. At one point, we see an opening in a wall, held open by a couple of companion cubes. If you squeeze yourself behind this wall, you'll see a bunch of scattered graffiti, telling us that the cake promised to us is a lie. This sight, accompanied by the chilling background music, causes our hearts to drop. Everything we thought we understood about the game has been flipped on its head. From this point on, we are highly suspicious of everything. You wonder what the true nature of Aperture Science is, about whether that weird-sounding voice on the PA system is truly on your side or not. It all culminates in a series of shocking revelations that have remained in the collective consciousness of gamers for 15 years. Though it's not the deepest moment in terms of profundity, one can argue that it is certainly the most effective. Number 5. Do you feel like a hero yet? Spec Ops: The Line. Just when we thought that Apocalypse Now was the only good adaptation of Heart of Darkness that we would ever get, Spec Ops: The Line comes along and fills the player with a fresh dose of Kurtzian horror. On the surface, Spec Ops is nothing really special. It's basically a Gears of War clone, but in the more realistic setting of Dubai. But towards the end, the game does things to make you question everything you have done up until that point. The people you have been shooting all this time, were they the bad guys? Maybe you're the bad guy. Even the loading screens start to mess with you, asking you if you even remember why you came to Dubai. All of these moments are meant to produce a sense of cognitive dissonance in both the player and the character of Martin Walker, whom they control. The peak of this dissonance happens at the end when Walker meets his nemesis, Colonel Conrad, a man whom he had been speaking to over a radio throughout the game. However, soon after their encounter, Walker finds the corpse of Conrad sitting in a wheelchair. This means that Walker was hallucinating not just Conrad and his voice, but so many other things throughout the game. The ghost of Conrad then reappears and forces Walker to confront all of the people he killed, all the terrible and sometimes criminal things Walker had done throughout the game. As Conrad makes his point, the player slowly realizes that they share some culpability in what has transpired. For both the self-reflection that this moment induces and the commentary the game makes on video game violence, Spec Ops: The Line easily merits its spot in the top 5. Number 4. Would You Kindly? BIOSHOCK. Following in the same vein as Spec Ops, BIOSHOCK also makes the player reflect on their actions. Unlike Captain Walker, who followed his own orders, the main character of BIOSHOCK, Jack, is ordered around by a man named Frank Fontaine, arch-nemesis of the ruler of the underwater city of Rapture, Andrew Ryan. Every time Fontaine gives an order, he prefaces it with the words, "Would you kindly?" Up until the fateful encounter with Ryan, we do not give a second thought to Fontaine's orders, believing that killing Ryan is for the greater good. But when we do meet him, he chastises both Jack and the gamer for being so easily manipulated. He proves his point by repeatedly saying, "Would you kindly?" 3 words that seem to have a hypnotic power over Jack. Like Spec Ops, this moment makes the gamer contemplate the subject of control. How in control are we over our own actions? How willing are we to follow orders? Though BIOSHOCK's spiritual precursor, System Shock 2, invokes the same kind of questions, it's the "would you kindly" element that puts BIOSHOCK right over the top. It's the guilt that the game instills in the player that elevates this moment to the level of true profundity. Now, would you kindly hit that like button? Yeah, like nobody's made that joke before, Max. Whoa, how original! Number 3. Ending E. NIER Automata. In my top 10 most profound games list, I gave NIER Automata my number 1 spot, because at all times, the game is presenting ideological conundrums that have no clear answer, but fascinate us with their intellectual and emotional density. The greatest of these moments, I think, happens at the very end of the game. The 2 support robots that have been following you throughout the game, Pod 42 and Pod 153, are supposed to carry out a data wipe of everything from the Yorha network, including the memory data of their previous masters known as A2, 2B, and 9S. However, before they do this, both pods develop a form of sentience and go against their programming. Instead of going forward with the memory wipe, they decide to preserve the data. In order to do this, they have to engage in a bullet hell minigame where they fight the game's end credits. The 2 pods realize that they cannot beat this minigame on their own. With each successive failure, the game taunts you, asking if you're ready to give up. If you choose to persevere, gamers from all over the world will sacrifice their saved data in order to power you up and help you reach the end of the minigame. When you eventually reach the end, you protect the data from a memory wipe and reconstruct the bodies of your former masters. Before the game concludes, it offers you the same chance to help other gamers around the world, but you must do what they did. You have to sacrifice your saved data. How many other games require you to make an actual sacrifice, one that cannot be reversed?
Well, if you're playing on the PC, you can make a copy of the data, save it to another file.
Yeah, I know, but what's important is the moment's symbolic value. Though NIER Replicant's ending C allows you to delete your saved data as well, Automata's ending E trumps it, in my opinion, because your data will help an actual person. The question is, though, would you be willing to sacrifice all that time and effort to help a complete stranger? Number 2. The Morpheus conversation. Deus Ex. 2 of the biggest problems facing humanity in the modern era are as follows. 1. The prevalence of fake news and misinformation, and 2. The crisis of meaning following the death of religion. Who do we turn to when the gods and idols of our recent past suffer a Nietzschean death? Can we find a new god to deliver us from societal degradation, from the negative effects of misinformation? Deus Ex argues that we will find this new god, but we have to be careful regarding what form it takes. On the one hand, this new god could take the form of an AI. In Deus Ex, this god takes the form of Helios. However, before we encounter Helios, we meet its prototype in the form of Morpheus. Morpheus argues to the main character, J.C. Denton, that humans need some sort of omnipresent god to watch over them and judge them in the name of truth, just as the old gods supposedly did. Society cannot function otherwise, because society requires judgments between what is true and false, moral and immoral. The problem with Morpheus's argument, however, is that the AI was built by human hands. Even if it is a higher mind, it is still tainted by human imperfection. In order for this new god to truly work, it has to be a merging of the digital mind with the organic mind. In the case of Deus Ex, this merge happens at the end of the game with Helios and J.C. Denton. This renders JC as basically the new Jesus Christ, which is what his initials stand for. The profundity of this moment becomes evident when you ask yourself this question. Will humans be able to merge with technology? If so, will we be able to merge our minds? And if we can, maybe we can create a mind whose sophistication rises to that of a hypothetical Jesus Christ. Do we want such a being to rule over us? To save us from the crisis of meaning? To distinguish between what is true and what's not? Let that keep you awake for the next several nights. And number 1, the final codec conversation. Metal Gear Solid 2. For all intents and purposes, this moment makes a lot of the same arguments that Deus Ex did, regarding the problem of misinformation and the need for a digital god to save us from it. The one element that elevates Metal Gear Solid 2's moment above Deus Ex's moment is that it shows the player how they actively make the problem of misinformation worse. By contrast, Deus Ex merely discusses the problem. I cannot summarize how it involves the player right now, because that would take way too long. If you want to learn how, please go watch my aforementioned video, The Most Profound Moment in Gaming History. For now, I'll just say that if you want to understand just how big the problem of fake news is, and how f***ed we all are because of it, go watch that video. Ever since I first understood what was happening in this moment, about 12 years ago, I have been plagued by existential horror. I have watched society's descent into the grips of their online echo chambers, and the violent tribalism that has produced. It's very disturbing. Especially when the AI in the game argues that a single person motivated by misinformation can ruin the world. But fret not. The game does provide a message of hope. As long as we dedicate ourselves to live in harmony with the truth, and to negate our bias at every possible turn, a single person can save the world. And we need to realize the truth of that more now than ever before. And that's my list. Do you agree with my choices? Do you agree with the order of my choices? Are there one or two moments that I neglected or forgot? Please let me know in the comment section below. By the way, before you go, I gotta ask, are you as excited as I am for the release of Elden Ring on Friday? If so, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll be bringing you deep dives into the lore of Elden Ring next week. In the meantime, check out some of my other deep dives into some of From Software's other games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne. I'll put links to those videos on screen. Until next time, just remember, as always, stay yellow, you hear? I'm out.